Today is July 26, 2023. My name is Rob Carr of Kalamazoo Right to Life, and this is Pro-Life Week. Well, just one thing on the docket today, and actually it's not even related to the issue of abortion or the life issues, but it's been on my mind the last few days, and maybe I need to get it off my chest. So if I'm not talking about abortion and that bothers you, forgive me, but I'm going to plunge ahead anyway. Last week, the Attorney General for the state of Minnesota, his name was Keith Ellison, a former member of Congress, he was talking briefly about Clarence Thomas, the Supreme Court Justice. And he was talking about Clarence Thomas in the context of this movie from the early 1990s, Django Unchained, about a black man who is seeking revenge on the white people who have enslaved him. And it's a Western, but it's a pretty gory, pretty bloodthirsty movie, which I have not seen. And I have absolutely no interest in seeing, because I'm not into that kind of gore. But anyway, in the context of talking about this movie, there's a character in the movie, I think his name is Stephen, but I'm not positive, who is referred to in the movie as the house slave. Now you've got field hands, field slaves, and then you've got the house slave who works in the mansion, in the plantation, in the home. And apparently this Stephen character is, even though he's a black slave, he's not necessarily supportive of this effort by this main character to seek revenge on killing all these white people. So I'm not saying that he is supportive of the white master, but he's not gung-ho and wanting to help this Django, this black slave. So in the context of this discussion, Keith Ellison said, when I see this house slave, this Stephen, that's how I see Clarence Thomas. He didn't use the word I see Clarence Thomas as the house slave, but he says, but when I see that Stephen, that's how I see him. I see him as the house slave. And, that's pretty derogatory. I've mentioned before about how MSNBC's Joy Reid has referred to Clarence Thomas as Uncle Clarence, as in Uncle Tom. Well, we all know what that means, what an Uncle Tom is. A person, or this person is like an Oreo cookie. He's black on the outside, but he's white on the inside. Derogatory, scandalous things to say about a black person. That he's white on the outside, but black on the outside, but white on the inside. But that's how they see Clarence Thomas. He's a black man who has a mind of his own. He's a conservative black jurist who looks at the Constitution, he looks at the issues, and he decides based on the law, based on the Constitution. And, he ruled against affirmative action. See, this all really came up because Clarence Thomas was part of the majority vote that basically told Harvard University that you cannot use race as a reason to add points to a prospective student's score to get into Harvard. These Asian students had higher test scores, ACT scores. They just outscored some black students, but the black students were getting in disproportionately higher because they got extra points for their race, not for their merit, but for the color of their skin. And the Supreme Court said, you can't do that. We are a colorblind society. You get in on your merit. So So because Clarence Thomas has opposed affirmative action, and now this vote is guaranteed it, they're they're so upset they can't think straight, and the liberals are very upset about at Clarence Thomas, and they're bringing up charges about influence peddling and going on vacations, and some of the liberal justices have done some of the same thing, but it's different because Clarence Thomas is a black man who acts like he's white to the liberals, and they can't have that. They cannot have that. So he's the house slave. Well, so then I got to thinking, as my mind kind of meanders through this thinking about how the liberals, the Democrats, primarily the Democrats in the Senate, have treated other Republican nominated Supreme Court justices. So the first one on my list is Robert Bork. And I'm not going to go through a huge litany here, but for my older viewers here, my older friends, Robert Bork was highly qualified and nominated by Ronald Reagan, and he was savaged by the Democrats. And there were dozens and dozens of pro-labor and pro-abortion and civil rights groups that rose up in a coalition to destroy this man's character. And he told the truth. He was very honest in the confirmations hearings. But they savaged him, absolutely savaged him. Robert Bork, 1986. So then we come to Clarence Thomas, who may not have been the most qualified black judge to be promoted to the Supreme Court. I accept that. He'd only been a federal judge for a year before George H.W. Bush tapped him to be on the Supreme Court. I understand he didn't have as much experience as some other judges. But, here again, the Democrats savaged him, and then the whole Anita Hill issue came up about sexual harassment, and she testified, and then he testified, denying all these salacious allegations against him. But he was savaged because he was a conservative, and obviously because Anita Hill was a black woman, a black attorney who the Democrats claimed that she was credible, but the Democrats wanted to destroy his character, destroy it. Okay, so we can fast forward through a little bit of this. They didn't go after Anthony Kennedy or Robert Souter because these people were safe. They were moderate Democrats. They were not dangerous. And they didn't, for whatever reason, they didn't go after Antonin Scalia, but he actually was around the same time as Bork. They spent all their energy on Bork, and they kind of ignored Scalia. But here then in 2017, Neil Gorsuch is tapped by Donald Trump, and they went after him. Not as hard, but they went after him, and the vote was fairly close. The next year was Brett Kavanaugh. Brett Kavanaugh, again, he was savage. They brought up a trumped-up charge that could not be verified by any document. The woman, that Christine Blasey Ford, she had no real proof other than her memory, and she probably had been assaulted by someone. She probably was, but it was not Brett Kavanaugh. The person might have had the name of Brett, but it wasn't Kavanaugh. He had enough documentation to say that where he was pretty much every day that summer, and he was not there at this party. And her best friends couldn't verify it. And there just was no proof. But the Democrats savaged him. They just savaged Brett Kavanaugh. And the vote was extremely close. Every Democrat basically voted against him, except maybe one or two. And then Amy Barrett, the next year in 2020, she was savage, but not quite as much as Brett Kavanaugh. But the vote was here again. The vote was 52-48. Pretty much every Democrat voted against her. The Democrats, they play hardball. if there's a conservative Republican for the Supreme Court, it's almost a guarantee they will vote against you no matter how well qualified you are. But when Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was as liberal as Antonin Scalia was conservative, when Ruth Bader Ginsburg was nominated, the Senate vote was 97-3. Practically every single Republican voted for her. Why? Because she was qualified. She was competent. She had the credentials. She had the experience, and because Bill Clinton won the election, and he had the right to pick his court, and the Republicans gave him that vote. They did, 97-3, and the Republicans. Most of the Republicans voted for Elena Kagan, for Sonia Sotomayor, for Stephen Breyer. Right down the line, typically Republicans have voted yes for Democratic Supreme Court justices, but the Democrats will never, it seems, never vote for a conservative justice. It's not in their DNA. They play hardball, and it's all based on ideology. You could have the best credential, have gone to the best law school, you could have been a judge for 10 years. No matter. If there's even a hint that you are pro-life or that you have conservative positions, you will not get a yes vote from liberal Democrats. But Republicans will give due diligence to a person's character, to their credentials, to their experience, and they will vote for pro-abortion justices. They will. Maybe that's wrong, but they will. So I'm going to end this now. Clarence Thomas is not Uncle Clarence. Clarence Thomas is not a house slave. We owe him more respect for being the long-standing, excellent Supreme Court justice that he is, Clarence Thomas. With that, I'll let you go, and I'll see you next time.